Hello, it's Cindy from HarmonyMoutainEco-Farm. And as promised earlier, oh, here's my cat Maple. Say hi, Maple. Anyway, as I had promised earlier, I was going to talk to you about some of the books that I read that led me into a life of farming. As you know, I'm a suburbanite from central Connecticut and kind of had a very traditional life, and my husband and I got into farming. Most of it was from my interaction with horses, and that kind of led to books that I like to read. And one of my favorite books that I read, that was something that was bought by my mother after we had gotten some chickens in our house, was a book called The Dirty Life by Kristen Kimball. I highly recommend this book if you're considering going into farming or doing a sustainable model somewhere out in the country. She was a city, it was this kind of like typical city girl who fell in love with a country boy, and they ended up leasing some property in upstate New York and building a farm. I mean, her husband was so radical that he didn't use motorized or tractors, anything like that on his farm, and they actually tilled their soil with horses and an old-fashioned plow. So I thought that was a terrific story. That's one extreme, and certainly I love the stories that tell the positives and the negatives of farming. So then when I got into it, yes, I had some mishaps and some days where I was like, what am I doing? But for the most part, I was pretty well prepared for the downside of farming. But for some reason, I really like it. So again, it's The Dirty Life by Kristen Kimball. And though I don't have these books with me, another one is Gaining Ground. That's Forrest Pritchard. And he and his family had a farm that wasn't financially profitable. And he turned that business around. His father had to work for a living just to sustain this family farm that had been in the family forever. And so he was able to save that farm. Joel Salatin is somebody Bill and I both like to follow as far as farming techniques and methods. And he wrote The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs. That's Joel Salatin, and I recommend anything that he writes and any of his YouTube videos. He's just a really interesting guy. The Accidental Farmer by Tim Young, another one I really enjoyed. And he was, again, your kind of typical city person, took his wife and moved out into the country to start a farm. And he was very radical, I think, in culling the herd. And I would have really liked to have followed his model, but I just don't have the heart for it. But he really did do, I think, an amazing job building really hardy animals that could sustain living in his climate and area without much intervention, and that's always the goal in sustainable farming. You know, if we were to never see an antibiotic again, or never have parasite control, or never have whatever it is, our animals would survive, whereas your typical commercial breeds would not without human intervention. So, and there are other issues on that topic if you continue to read. Temple Grandin, I talk about her all the time with regards to animal behavior and what they need. She is fantastic. Animals in Translation, she goes through each animal, each farm animal, including dogs and cats. She has a chapter on that. She includes her research, but it's the way that she writes or speaks, because I listen to many of these books on Audible in my commute back and forth from Connecticut to New Hampshire. But it's very readable and easy to maintain. Retain, not maintain. So anyway, here's a couple more Temple Grandin books. Animals Make Us Human. Again, it's about how each animal how we interact with animals, and also working with farm animals. Anything Temple Grandin is one of my faves. So, Growing a Farm is Kurt Timmeister. I love this book. This is a restaurateur who decided to buy a farm on Vashon Island in Seattle, Washington. His very interesting story, mistakes, successes, just a very honest portrayal of starting up a farm. Love this book. Read it several times. Hit by a Farm. This is a person who decided to run a sheep farm. Very funny. There's some very funny antics. A lot of these people who've written these books too are also journalists or writers in some way. And this person who wrote a book was a writer herself. And I just love her stories. You know, she really didn't love farming, but her partner wanted a farm, and so she went along as another person who kind of went along on the journey, and it ended up being the best thing that happened in their life. So again, another wonderful book. Those are the things that really inspired me. There's another book I really liked, and that was about goats. That's kind of where I started with the goats, so from chickens to the goats. Goat Song. It's just a beautiful pastoral story about a Vermont goat farmer, and it's just beautifully written. It's poetic, and about his the cheese that he makes. He's actually local in Vermont. Another one was The Chuckling Goat. One of my favorite stories about a farmer in Wales, and she ended up making a product out of honey and goat's milk that helped her her husband recover from MRSA. She, again, was a person who fell in love with a farmer and then ended up falling in love with the goats in a farm and made a life out of it. Beautifully, again, written book. So here's a couple of books that I use for reference. Family Cow Handbook. This was shown to me by a local person. It was actually her daughter who had this book, and it just has just some basic information about dairy cattle, beef cattle, the breeds, what you can expect. Really a very simple read. I have everything from every animal. Let me go get it. Locally Laid. Again, this is about eggs, and it was okay. It wasn't my favorite book. It might have been because I was listening to it on Audible as well as reading it, and I just didn't like the person's voice. So it's about how to build a plucky industry, changing egg farm from scratch. So, you know, there's some good information in those books, and it makes it easier to read when it's somebody's biography. For some reason, for me, that works. But Stories Guide to Raising Pigs. There's one on goats, horses, cows, chickens, everything. These are kind of the Bible reference things that you need to know about raising pigs. I will say some of these things are very traditional and I wouldn't use them, but it's still always good to kind of go back to that. For me, everybody's different in the way that they approach farming, but you know, this is kind of a more traditional way of doing things, and so it's there. And I did actually find out something kind of interesting about raising pigs and how the industry has kind of changed them in a way that's made them more susceptible to disease. So the pigs are coming back as far as the heritage breeds because of it. You know, there was just no attention paid to breeding, and that kind of wiped out a lot of pigs, a lot of good, healthy pigs. So anyway, that's my reference material. Those are the things that I've read. I hope this is helpful. Please, if you have any questions or comments, comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Have a wonderful afternoon from Harmony Mountain Eco Farm. Bye-bye.